Good morning, everyone. Pam Jacobson, your host of Three Things You Need to Know. Welcome. It's been about a month since we last met. For those of you that have been following me for some time, you know that I changed the format up to move the show to a monthly basis. And for those of you just joining, this has been going on for a year and a half now. And I would encourage you to go back. I, for many months, did a weekly program, and it really talked about all things functional medicine, really focused on health optimization. And I think there's a lot of good stuff in there to help you get your health to where you would like for it to be. I have put over in the notes area my contact information. For those of you who don't know anything about me, you can find more about what I do on my website at thehealingsanctuaryoc.com. But essentially, I work with clients all over the country. My main goal is to help people optimize their health and regain the vitality that we all deserve, extend longevity, work on quality of life. I'm particularly interested in aging since I just turned 60. And so it's very front and center for me at the moment. But today I'm going to talk about the new headline. I have many people who follow me on my program. Many of those people are my patients. I got a call from one of them this week asking my opinion about the vaccine, which of course is a very tricky discussion to have on social media. And so I'm going to basically qualify right from the get-go that I am not making a stand or any kind of a position on vaccine or whether or not you should do it. It is very much a personal decision. I'm simply here as an educator, and I'm talking to really basically the facts. So when I'm making a really important decision for myself, particularly when it involves my health, I really set out on a mission to educate myself so that I can make the best decision for me. And so that's what I'm encouraging all of you to do when it comes to vaccination. I know that there's a lot of pressure, increasing pressure on a daily basis for those maybe that have not opted for the vaccine to become vaccinated. But really, this program is for those of you who have either been vaccinated and are curious to know what the data is showing as far as the safety of that vaccine. And for those of you who have not yet been vaccinated, like my patient that called me earlier this week, but who are not opposed to it, but just didn't feel they had enough information to make that decision. So this week, you may be hearing about it in the news. There was a relatively large safety study that was published. And I wanted to highlight some of the information that came out of that, maybe distill it down, summarize it a little bit for those of you out there who are still feeling like you maybe don't have enough information to be able to make a decision. So I have the study up in front of me. So I'm going to, rather than trying to do it all from memory and paraphrase and potentially get some things incorrect, I want to be, very factual. So this is strictly just stuff that is already available to you publicly and something that you can easily find. I did post the source I used in the notes section there. I really appreciate the company medicalexpress.com. Because they're able to take something as complicated as a published study and distill that down into some of the facts that we can use. So that was the source that I used for the summarization of the data I looked at in that study. I'm not really going to go into all of it. I really wanted to talk mostly about the two key things that they looked at in the study, and that was the vaccine outcomes analysis. So looking directly at what happened with vaccination outcomes. Were there adverse events and what were they? And then looking at infection outcomes analysis. So what I appreciated about this study is, first of all, it's only looking at one vaccine. That's the BioNTech Pfizer mRNA vaccine. This was not a study that was conducted by Pfizer. And in fact, it was done by a large research institute in Israel in conjunction with Harvard and Boston Children's Hospital here in the U.S. And so I think it's, in my opinion, looking at medical research, this is, I think, a well-vetted and validated set of information that I would personally trust. So for those of you that look to me to give you, information and feedback on what I have researched and vetted. This is something that I feel is a valid set of information that's coming in that can help us get educated and understand, perhaps especially if we're in a position where we are wanting to make a decision. So why Israel? Well, they got on the stick pretty early in the whole COVID situation, and were rolled out their vaccine campaign early on, and actually had a large percentage of their population, and the numbers I've heard are upwards of 80% of their population vaccinated. So they have a relatively large population to study. And that was the real issue with the original vaccine data, but particularly from Pfizer, the vaccine safety study that was conducted, though it was enough to indicate that the vaccine was safe, it was still a relatively small population of about 27,000 individuals. So this study is looking at a much larger group of individuals, and over 800, almost 900,000 in vaccinated individuals versus the control group of unvaccinated but similarly matched individuals. So it's a very large study. This went on for over a year, so from December of 2020 through May of this year. So we have a long time with the amount of data that was collected. And this was not self-reporting. A lot of the vaccine safety information post-vaccine was self-reporting, right? You got a vaccine, and if you opted in, you got a questionnaire daily, then weekly, then monthly from the CDC about, your own subjectively reported symptoms and did you have any issues. In this study, it really did not rely on the individual. It relied on anonymized medical records. So the reason why I feel like that was a valid way to conduct this is because when you're looking at a large group of people and you're able to access medical records, an individual might have gotten a vaccine and in 3 or 4 weeks had some kind of an incident where they went to the doctor or they went to the hospital that they may not have associated with the vaccine. But if you look at 900,000 people and a certain percentage of them within a similar time frame of getting a vaccine had a similar incident, then we can start to extrapolate that and as potentially an adverse event related to the vaccine. So I think it's a really valid way to look at what actually went on. So in this study, they're using medical record data. They're using a tremendously much larger set of individuals. Those individuals, roughly 900,000, are matched with a 900,000 non-vaccinated control group, but the control group was further matched. So they looked at individuals that were similarly matched in terms of age and sociodemographics and some other data points. So they looked to get the most matched groups so that the data was going to be as accurate as it could possibly be. Because again, the whole point of the study was just to really look at, it seems to be one of the biggest reasons why people are concerned about getting the vaccine is they're worried that it's not safe, that it's somehow going to produce a health issue or a health issue down the line. And so we wanted to look at whether or not that was indeed occurring. So that was on the vaccination outcomes analysis, in terms of how they created that part of the study. The infection outcomes analysis then was looking at vaccinated individuals and these adverse events that were identified in the study compared to those who were unvaccinated that had been infected with the coronavirus, and whether or not they had similar adverse events, and if so, how did that compare to the vaccinated versus unvaccinated? So we looked at overall vaccine safety, and then we looked at, I would say probably, it was really looking at, of the adverse events, and there were some from the vaccine, were they worse than getting the infection? So that's the 2 data points we're going to cover here. The study did look at several other data points, and I just don't have the time to go into all of it. And vaccine safety was what I was mostly interested in talking about, and that's what my patient asked me to kind of point out from what we saw in the study. So so that's the two sets. Out of the study on the vaccine safety side, it was found to be safe, and there were 25 potential side effects that were examined, and many of these were the expected side effects, such as swollen lymph nodes and fever, and the majority of them were those types of side effects that were expected as part of an immune response, which we should be getting. If your immune system is working and you're getting a vaccine that is basically informing or teaching your immune system how to react to this virus, we would expect to have an immune response. So most of the reactions were related to the immune response, but there were 4 adverse events that were found to have a strong association with the vaccine. The most important one, and this is interesting because it's the one when my patient called me and I asked her, what are your concerns about the vaccine? She said, well, my friend's daughter recently got the vaccine. She's a young, I think, college-age woman. And she got a condition called myocarditis, and now she's potentially going to be impacted for the rest of her life. The number one adverse event that was found with the vaccine is myocarditis. That's a swelling or an inflammation, if you will, of the heart muscle. And it was found to be associated with the vaccine, but it was considered rare. So when they looked at incidences of myocarditis for every 100,000 vaccines given, it was about 2.7. So when we're looking at risk benefit, there are going to be almost in every vaccine that's ever been given, right, for say smallpox or polio or tetanus. I mean, these are conditions we don't have in our society anymore because vaccine did eradicate those diseases. So when we look at risk benefit, we're looking at, do the number of adverse events outweigh the benefit to the population on the whole? And in this case, they took it a step further to say myocarditis in an unvaccinated in a vaccinated individual versus somebody who had the coronavirus, which I thought was really interesting information to look at. So in just the vaccinated group, we saw 2.7 cases per 100,000 individuals, and they were mostly concentrated in young people, mostly males between the age of 20 and 34 was what we found. In contrast, the coronavirus infection in unvaccinated individuals was associated with 11 myocarditis cases per 100,000 infected individuals. So what is that? I don't know what you would consider the threefold or whatever. If it was 2.7 in the vaccinated, it's 11 individuals per 100,000 in the people who actually get the virus. And this has been my experience actually in my clinical practice, is for my patients who've actually gotten the virus, I've seen a number of them are what we call that long haul COVID, where they're even now months out from the infection, they're still dealing with respiratory symptoms, fatigue. Some have not gotten their smell and taste back yet, some cognitive decline. And so we are, I think it is real that the actual viral infection, regardless of how symptomatic you might have been, it does appear that there is some long-term sequelae. And at this point, we don't know, is that for the rest of your life? Is it eventually going to get better? But I think what this study showed is that all of the potential adverse events that we saw with the vaccine were things that were much worse in individuals who got the virus. So other adverse events that were moderately associated with the vaccination. So myocarditis was the only one that was thought to be most definitively associated with the vaccination. There were a few things that were moderately associated with it: swelling of lymph nodes, which is an expected side effect of immune response. There were 78 cases per 100,000. Appendicitis, interestingly enough, I think the thought about that is it's because the lymph nodes in that area are swelling around the appendix and causing the issue. There were 5 cases per 100,000. And then herpes, which I think is an immune system issue, with 16 cases per 100,000. In contrast to the relatively small number of adverse events, and again, myocarditis being the worst one with the vaccine, there were high rates of multiple serious adverse events associated with actually getting the infection among the unvaccinated. And I'm going to read these off because I'm taking this right from the study. This is not my opinion. I'm not out here to tell you whether you should be vaccinated or not. It's not my business. I'm not going to talk to you about what I chose or what my, all I'm here to do, and this was really at the behest of my patient, is to give you some highlights of this very important study, which I really encourage all of you to read on your own and become educated. The whole point here is for all of us to be educated. Once you have an education, then you can make the decision based on that. But I think when we allow ourselves to speculate, to listen to unvetted, undocumented misinformation, because I think there's a lot of that out there, right? Social media allows just about anybody to go online and pretend like they're some kind of an expert, and some very convincingly, and some have credentials, like maybe they're, a doctor or a scientist, or, yet they don't have large scale information like we have here over a long period of time. That I believe is, for me anyway, it's important to have, very objective, clear information. And what I particularly liked about the study is Pfizer had nothing to do with it. They weren't involved in the funding. This isn't a Pfizer study. This is another country's look at its own population so that it can understand, can we expect to have some issues with the safety of this vaccine? We now have 80% of our population vaccinated. And what they found is, in very small cases, there will be a few. For the most part, the safety of the vaccine is very clear, and you're in a much worse position if you get the virus. And here are some of the things that we saw in the study: cardiac arrhythmia, which is just where the heart is unable to beat with a normal rhythm. There was a 3.8-fold increase, or 166 cases per 100,000 infected. Kidney damage, 14.8-fold increase, or 125 excess cases per 100,000. Pericarditis is the sac around the heart, inflammation, 11 cases. Pulmonary embolism, 62 cases per 100,000. Deep vein thrombosis, 43 cases per 100,000. Myocardial infarction, heart attack, 25 per 100,000. And stroke at 14 per 100,000. So what we saw in the unvaccinated infected group, now I want to be clear, it was the unvaccinated infected group. This wasn't vaccinated individuals who have then since had a breakthrough infection, because we are seeing that happen. But this is in unvaccinated individuals who were infected with coronavirus. These are some of the adverse things that we're seeing as a result of the actual infection. So hopefully, and this research, as I said before, was conducted by the Claylit Research Institute in Israel, Harvard here in the US, and Boston Children's Hospital. So ultimately the bottom line was that the results of the study validate the previously reported findings of the original Pfizer safety study that where that study was conducted on 21,000 individuals. Because it was so small, you weren't able to give precise data about safety, but it was enough to indicate that the vaccine was safe and allow the FDA to give the conditional approval. This study found that the vaccine was indeed safe, and so kind of validated that original information. So I hope, the bottom line is the study, it sheds light for the first time on the significant side effects of the coronavirus vaccine. Since this is a more comprehensive analysis based on electronic medical records, there are more reliable assessments than those published to date, which have relied on voluntary active reporting. So I think that's important to understand too, is this was not subjective data coming from individuals who were reporting their situation. This was taken from anonymized medical records. So for me personally, I found this to be valuable information. And I hoped that by sharing it today, that you would go and look at the study for yourself, that if someone came to you, if you've got people who look to you for your input on things, maybe you're a parent or a teacher, or maybe even the CEO of a company who has employees coming in, and and perhaps maybe you're in a position to be questioning whether or not you should require vaccines or do in-services for your employees on vaccines. I think everyone, regardless of what your position is or your stance is, should be looking at all of the available information and really educating yourself so that you can make a very educated decision. I believe this data from the study ranks kind of high up there in terms of validated, vetted information that should be on your list of educational resources when you're, when you're gathering that to make a decision. So as always, I'm available. Answer any questions that you may have. Let me just see here, Susanna. How many FDA-approved drugs were recalled in 2020? Drug recalls in 2020 climbed to 344. I don't know, Susanna. I'm not talking about drug recalls here, so I can't answer that question. How bad it is, or I'm simply here summary of the study, and to encourage all of you out there to read it for yourself and to get educated. I think that will help you with your decision-making process. And again, I did this mostly because I have an important client and patient that asked me to summarize the information because the study data is absolutely extensive. So at any rate, I'm always available. You've got my number, you've got my email, and I will be back with you a month from now. If there's any subjects that you would like me to cover or like to hear more about, I'm happy to do that for you, and I look forward to continuing our discussion in the future. Take care, everyone. Have a great week.